Scripture portions of the day. Day 335.
Matthew 17, OANT. And after 6 days Yeshua took Kepha, Yaakov, and Yohanan, his brother, and brought them up to the high mountain by themselves. Yeshua was transformed before them, and his face shone like the sun, but his garments became white like light. And Moses and Elijah appeared to them as they were speaking with him. But Kepha answered and said to Yeshua, "My Lord, it is beautiful for us that we should be here. And you wish, we will make here 3 booths, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." And while he was speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And a voice came from the cloud, which said, "This is my Son, the Beloved, in whom I delight. Hear him." And when the disciples heard, they fell on their faces, and they were very afraid. And Yeshua came to them, and he touched them, and said, "Arise, do not be afraid." And they lifted up their eyes, and did not see anyone except Yeshua by himself. And as they descended from the mountain, Yeshua ordered them, and he said to them, "Do not tell this vision in the presence of any man until the Son of Man will rise from the dead." And his disciples asked him, and they were saying to him, "Why do the scribes therefore say that Elijah must first come?" Yeshua answered and said to them, "Elijah does come first, so that everything may end. But I say to you, behold, Elijah has come, and they did not know him, and they have done unto him everything whatsoever they wished. Likewise also the Son of Man is going to suffer from them." Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them about Yohanan the Baptizer. And when they came to the multitude, a man came up to him and knelt on his knees. And he said to him, "My Lord, have mercy on me. My son has a lunatic demon, and has become ill, for he has fallen many times into the fire, and many times into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they were not able to heal him." Yeshua answered and said, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I endure you? Bring him here to me." And Yeshua rebuked it, and the demon went out of him, and the boy was healed from that moment. Then the disciples came to Yeshua himself alone, and they said to him, "Why were we not able to heal him?" And Yeshua said to them, "Because of your unbelief. For amen, I say to you, that if you had faith like a grain of mustard seed, you may say to this mountain, 'Move from here,' and it will be moved, and nothing will be difficult for you. But this kind does not go out except by fasting and prayer." And when they were traveling in Galilee, Yeshua said to them, "The Son of Man will be betrayed to the hands of men, and they will murder him, and on the 3rd day they will rise." And it grieved them greatly. And when they came to Capernaum, those who take the 2 each, quarter shekels head tax, came to Kepha, and said to him, "Does not your rabbi pay the 2 quarter shekels?" And he said to them, "Yes." And when Kepha entered the house, Yeshua anticipated him, and he said to him, "How does it seem to you, Simeon? From whom does the kings of the earth take taxes and head money? From their children or from strangers?" And Simeon said to him, "From strangers." Then Yeshua said to him, "Then the children are free. But lest we give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a fish hook. And the first fish that comes up, open its mouth, and you'll find a shekel. Take that and give for me and you."
Deuteronomy 30, Septuagint. And it shall come to pass, when all these things shall come upon thee, the blessings and the curse, which I have set before thy face, and thou shalt call them to mind, and among the nations, wherein Jehovah shall have scattered thee, and shall return to Jehovah thy Elohim, and shall hearken to his voice, according to all things which I have charged thee this day, with all thy heart, with all thy soul. Then Jehovah shall heal thy iniquities, and shall pity thee, and shall again gather thee out of the nations, among which Jehovah has scattered thee. If thy dispersion be from one end of heaven to the other, thence will Jehovah thy Elohim gather thee, thence will Jehovah thy Elohim take thee. And Jehovah thy Elohim shall bring thee in from thence and into the land which thy fathers have inherited, and thou shalt inherit it, and he will do thee good, and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Jehovah shall purge thy heart and the heart of thy seed, to love Jehovah thy Elohim with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and that thou may live. And Jehovah thy Elohim will put these curses upon thine enemies, and upon those that hate thee, who have persecuted thee. And thou shalt return and hearken to the voice of Jehovah thy Elohim, and shalt keep his commands, all that I charge you thee this day. And Jehovah thy Elohim shall bless thee in every work of thy hand, in the offspring of thy body, in the offspring of thy cattle, in the fruits of thy land, because Jehovah thy Elohim will again rejoice over thee for good, for he rejoiced over thy fathers. If thou wilt hearken to the voice of Jehovah thy Elohim, to keep his commandments, and his ordinances, and his judgments, written in the book of the law, if thou turn to Jehovah thy Elohim with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, for this command which I give you this day is not grievous, neither is it far from you. It is not in heaven above, as there were some one saying, Who shall go up for us into the heaven, and shall take for us, and we will hear and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea, saying, Who will go over for us to the other side of the sea, and take it for us, and make it audible to us, and we will do it. The word is very near to thee, in thy mouth, in thy heart, and in thine hands, to do it. Behold, I have set before thee this day life and death, good and evil. If thou wilt hearken to the commands of Jehovah thy Elohim, which I command thee this day, to love Jehovah thy Elohim, to walk in his ways, and to keep his ordinances and judgments, then ye shall live, and shall be many in number. And Jehovah thy Elohim shall bless thee in the land in which thou goest to inherit it. But if thy heart change, and thou wilt not hearken, and thou shalt go astray and worship other gods, and serve them, I declare to you this day that ye shall utterly perish, and ye shall by no means live long upon the land, into which ye go over Jordan to inherit it. I call both heaven and earth to witness this day against you. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Choose thou life, that thou and thy seed may live, to love Jehovah thy Elohim, to hearken to his voice, to cleave to him. For this is thy life, and the length of thy days, for thou shouldest dwell in the land which Jehovah swore to thy fathers, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, to give them.
Esther 5, Septuagint. And it came to pass on the third day, when she had ceased praying, that she put off her mean dress, and put on her glorious apparel. And being splendidly arrayed, and having called upon Elohim, the overseer and preserver of all things, she took her two maids, and she leaned upon one as a delicate female, and the other followed bearing her train. And she was blooming in the perfection of her beauty, and her face was cheerful, and it was benevolent, but her heart was straitened for fear. And, having passed through all the doors, she stood before the king, and he was sitting upon his royal throne, and he had put on his glorious apparel, covered all over with gold and precious stones, and was very terrible. And having raised his face, resplendent with glory, he looked with intense anger, and the queen fell, and changed her color as she fainted. And she bowed herself before the head of the maid, and went before her. But Elohim changed the spirit of the king's gentleness, and intense feelings he sprang from off his throne, and took her into his arms, until she recovered. And he comforted her with peaceable words, and said to her, What is the matter, Esther? I am thy brother. Be of good cheer, thou shalt not die, for our command is openly declared to thee. Draw nigh. And having raised the golden scepter, he laid it upon her neck, and embraced her, and said, Speak to me. And she said to him, I saw thee, my lord, as an angel of Elohim, and my heart was troubled for fear of thy glory. For thou, my lord, art to be wondered at. and thy face is full of grace. And while she was speaking, she fainted and fell. And then the king was troubled, and all his servants comforted her. And the king said, What wilt thou, Esther? And what is thy request? Ask even half of the kingdom, and it shall be thine. And Esther said, Today is my great day. If then it seem good to the king, let both him and Aman come to the feast which I will prepare this day. And the king said, Hasten Aman hither, that we may perform the word of Esther. So they both came to the feast of which Esther spoke. And at the banquet the king said to Esther, What is thy request, Queen Esther? Speak, and thou shalt have all that thou requirest. And she said, My request and my petition are, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, that the king and Aman come again tomorrow to the feast, which I shall prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do the same. And Aman went out from the king very glad and merry. But when Aman saw Mordecai, the Jew, in the court, he was greatly enraged. And having gone into his own house, he called his friends and his wife Zosara, and he shewed them his wealth, and the glory which the king had invested in him, and how he had caused him to take precedence, and bear chief rule in the kingdom. And Aman said, The queen has called no one to the feast with the king but me, and I am invited tomorrow. But these things pleased me not, while I see Mordecai, the Jew, in the court. And Zorsora and his friends said to him, Let there be a gallows made for thee of 50 cubits, and in the morning do thou speak to the king, and let Mordecai and be hanged on the gallows. But do thou go into the feast with the king, and be merry. And the saying pleased Aman, and the gallows was prepared. Esther 6, Septuagint. But Jehovah removed sleep from the king that night, and he told his servant to bring in the books, the registers of daily events, to read to him. And he found the records written concerning Mardochai, how he had told the king concerning the 2 chamberlains of the king, when they were keeping guard, and sought to lay hands on Artaxerxes. And the king said, What honor or favor have we done to Mordecai? And the king's servant said, Thou hast not done anything to him. And while the king was inquiring about the kindness of Mordecai, behold, Aman was in the court. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Aman was come in to speak to the king, that he should hang Mardochai on the gallows, which he had prepared. And the king's servant said, Behold, Aman stands in the court. And the king said, Call him. And the king said to Aman, What shall I do to the man whom I wish to honor? And Aman said to himself, Whom would the king honor but myself? And he said to the king, As for the man whom the king wishes to honor, let the king's servant bring the robe of fine linen, which the king puts on, and the horse on which the king rides, and let him give it to the one of the king's noble friends, and let him array the man whom the king loves, and let him mount him on the horse, and proclaim through the streets of the city, Thus shall it be done to everyone who the king honors. Then the king said to Aman, Thou hast well said, so do to Mordecai, the Jew, who waits in the palace, and let not a word of what thou hast spoken be neglected. So Aman took the robe and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and mounted him on the horse, and went through the streets of the city, and proclaimed, saying, Thus shall it be to every man whom the king wishes to honor. And Mordecai returned to this palace, but Aman went home mourning, and having his head covered. And Aman related the events that had befallen unto Zorsara, his wife, and his friends. And his friends and his wife said to him, If Mordecai be of the race of the Jews, and thou hast begun to be humbled before him, thou wilt assuredly fall, and thou wilt not be able to withstand him, for the living Elohim is with him. While they were yet speaking, the chamberlain arrived to hasten Aman, to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Proverbs 23, Septuagint. If thou sit to sup at the table of a prince, consider attentively to the things set before thee, and apply thy hand, knowing that it behooves thee to prepare such meats. But if thou art very insatiable, desire not his provisions, for these belong to a false life. If thou art poor, measure not themselves with rich men, but refrain thyself in thy wisdom. If thou shouldest fix thy eyes upon him, he will disappear, for wings like an eagle's are prepared for him, and he returns to the house of his master. Sup not with an envious man, neither desire his meats, for he eats and drinks as if anyone should swallow a hair. And do not bring him into thyself, nor eat thy morsel with him, for he will vomit it up, and spoil thy fair words. Say nothing in the ears of a fool, lest at any time he sneer at thy wise words. Remove not the ancient landmarks, and enter not upon the possession of the fatherless. For Jehovah is their Redeemer, he is mighty, and will plead their cause with thee. Apply thine heart to instruction, and prepare thine ears for words of discretion. Refrain not the chastening of a child, for if thou beat him with a rod, he shall not die. For thou shalt beat him with a rod, and shalt deliver his soul from death. Son, if thy heart be wise, thou shalt also gladden my heart, and thy lips shall converse with my lips, if they be right. Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of Jehovah all the day. For if thou shouldest keep these things which thou hast posterity, and thy hope shall not be removed. Hear, my son, and be wise, and rightly direct the thoughts of thine heart. Be not a wine-bibber, neither continue long at feasts and purchases of flesh. For every drunkard and whoremonger shall be poor, and every sluggard shall clothe himself with tatters and ragged garments. Hearken, my son, to the father, and begot thee. Despise not thy mother, because she is grown old. A righteous father brings up his children well, and his soul rejoices over a wise son. Let thy father and thy mother rejoice over thee, and let her that bore thee be glad. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a strange woman, a strange house, is a vessel full of holes, and a strange well is narrow. Who has woe? Who trouble? Who has quarrels? Who has vexations and disputes? Who has bruises without cause, whose eyes are livid? Are not those of them that stay long at wine? Are not those of them that haunt the places where banquets are? Be not drunk with wine, but converse with the just men, and converse with them openly. For if thou shouldest set thine eyes on bowls and cups, thou shalt afterwards go more naked than a pestle. But at last such a one stretches himself out, as one smiteth by a serpent, and the venom is diffused through him, as by a horned serpent. Whenever thine eyes shall behold a strange woman, then thy mouth shall speak perverse things, and thou shalt lie as in the midst of the sea, and as a pilot in the great storm. And thou shalt say, They smote me, and I was not pained. They mocked me, and I knew it not. Then it will be morning, and I will go and seek those with whom I may go in company,